Hi, welcome to Visionary Ventures. I, I look different than I normally do. I debated whether to, all right, let me start off. Earlier in the week, I was watching a video YouTube channel. She was watching some presidential movies, political movies. It's President's Week that she on her channel, and so she's watching these recommendations of movies involving presidents. And there's one, All the President's Men. And so this time it was Dave, the comedy Dave by Ivan Reitman. And it got me thinking, I haven't posted a video. I've been posting videos more recently, but I haven't posted a lot to this channel. I've been posting to my Samantha Bahar YouTube channel. That's the one where I normally dress up like this. And I recorded one, if you want to go check that out. But I wanted to talk about an aspect of my life. Watching that video, I was inspired to talk about my interest in politics, going into politics. I guess I don't have any interest in going into politics right now. It's too crummy. I don't think you'd get everything. It's too nasty right now. And it's not like I'd have resources to be able to do it, but I wanted to do it. And normally the only time I can be able to record is on weekends, and this being Saturday. This is when I normally dress up, because during the week, I work a week, I work the day and then I come home, and I don't have as much time to get dressed up like this. But yes, this is what I do in my weekends. Now, I can always take this down if I want to, but I used to post videos with me dressed up, not as well dressed as I am now, but I had them, and now they're hidden. And I've transferred them over to my Samantha Bahar channel, not because of anything anybody has said, but because it just didn't seem like the two would mesh together. This channel is about theories, understanding oneself, and of course, maybe people are thinking right now, perhaps, yeah, I'm really understanding how understanding you right now. But understanding oneself and fascinating theories. There's another thing I was really eager, I still am, maybe I'll cover this in this video, but really excited about sharing this with you. It's about the biblical numbers, particularly the ages in the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and uncovering the patterns in there. But I'll leave that for later, possibly later in this video. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about my inspiration to want to go into politics and run for president someday. It really touches home because this was a period in high school, and it really covers a lot of things. It covers that girl from high school that I mentioned. So I thought that should be talked about on this channel, just to share myself. That's more of a blog thing. That's what this channel is also for. It's kind of like blogging, and if you blog, you can perhaps understand yourself. Sorry, I'll be maybe doing that quite a few times because this hair is stringy. First of all, let me say again, I'm not gay. This is a hobby. I don't identify as a woman, but I thought that this is something really. First of all, I was inspired by female impersonators, people like Jimmy James, who impersonated other female celebrities, but particularly went for Marilyn Monroe. Somebody suggested he could also be a good Madonna impersonator, but these are men. It's a field that's actually goes way back. I'm not going to make this a female impersonator video, but it goes way back. Men doing makeup. In fact, a lot of men, that's how a lot of makeup techniques started. It started in theater and contouring and trying to approximate lighting conditions and so forth. And there are some men that are really good at impersonating not only women like the female look, but impersonating specific women. There are a lot of popular ones, Madonna, Cher. There are a lot of impersonators of Cher. There's actually a woman, a biological woman, who was on the Sally Jesse Raphael episode. You can find it on YouTube. It's in 4 parts. She's a woman, but she impersonates Celine Dion. I thought that was pretty funny. She was in this cast sitting on the stage. If you've seen those daytime talk shows from the 1990s, late 80s and early 90s, or late 80s and 90s. And that goes into politics to some degree. Politics has become even more sour now than it was even in the early 90s. Now, what I'm going to talk about is my interest, which had begun in the early 90s when I was in high school. Anyway, the daytime talk shows, people like Donahue, people like Sally Jesse Raphael, Geraldo, those were, I would say, the 3 primary ones. And then a little down the road, you had a flurry of Oprah Winfrey. So basically, Donahue began I think in 1960s, late 60s, something like that. And then I think came Oprah Winfrey. She got her show in Chicago, and then became nationally broadcast or nationally syndicated. That was like 1980 something. So there was a long period where it was just Donahue. Oh, another thing is a lot of these people began in radio. They had a radio background. Donahue, I'd be surprised if Donahue didn't have a radio background of some kind. I know Sally Jesse Raphael certainly had a radio background, and somebody who didn't have, well, he had a talk show. He had a Tomorrow Show in the 70s, and it was revived. It was on at 10 o'clock on a channel called I think it was CNBC. They had a flurry of well, anyway, I'll get into that. But there was also Tom Snyder. He didn't have a talk show the way Donahue and Sally Jesse Raphael and Oprah Winfrey had. He had just guests on this Tomorrow Show, and he also had a radio show. I think he was doing simultaneously. But he was a radio broadcaster as well as a TV broadcaster. And that format was simply having a guest and talking to the guest. And that's a good segue into, well, I'll segue into the segue and so forth. So you had those people, and Donahue brought, yes, I remember now. Yeah, he had a radio show, and then the idea somewhere in the 70s or the 60s was to just have it done live and film it as a TV show. This is a radio show. It's very simple, just having a host interviewing a guest about some topic. Usually it's community interest, like just issues of the day and national zeitgeist, or it's politics or political figures, usually politics and whatever's going on in the zeitgeist of the community, the national community at the time. And then I think the first time may not have had an audience, or maybe it had an audience, but it didn't have any audience interaction. They were just watching these 2 people simply sitting on stage with a chair in front of, with a table between them, and this Donahue was interviewing his guest for that episode. And then, according to the documentary I watched, it wasn't as interesting. During the commercial breaks, I think somehow he happened to invite the audience to ask questions. And then that's when it really took off. So that became a regular staple of his show, Donahue, where he would interview the guest for a while, and then he would go to the audience. He would walk around the stage. I don't know how old you are, maybe if you remember, but back decades ago, it was typical to have somebody walking through the audience with a microphone and simply position the microphone in front of their face, and the person would ask a question, and the guest would actually answer them. Now that seemed to change. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but in terms of my perspective, but it seemed to change with Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh didn't have any guests. In fact, at the beginning, I remember because I would listen to it for a while. I don't bend to that political stripe, but I would listen to it for entertainment. I liked having talk radio shows on in the background, and they weren't just on the radio. They weren't just politics. There were, in terms of radio, they had hosts that would talk about love life, giving advice, politics, medicine. Other guests would talk, or other hosts would talk about computer repair and so forth. It's really great. I think that was the heyday, or the end of the heyday. Thank goodness I was at least there for the heyday of that of being able to do that before Rush Limbaugh came in, and then other copycats of Rush Limbaugh. I think I'm safe in saying there were copycats of Rush Limbaugh that stepped in, like G. Gordon Liddy and so forth, and they made it just all about themselves, or there were no guests. That was the thing I wanted to say about Rush Limbaugh. Early on, I caught that he would say something to the effect he didn't need guests. This is his show. And so he would just create, and he was an effective broadcaster. He was an effective entertainer, and I give him credit. Like, if it's up to you what you want to do. It's what he was doing was very different from the others. He would just talk himself into the camera and talk about news of the day from a conservative point of view, and he would have he would have on funny, amusing skits and so forth, recorded skits and so forth. So, but that was a minority, at least from where I came from, what I was listening to. The majority of the radio shows were people giving advice, and that's where you had a lot of blah 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 blah, and daytime TV talk shows, or afternoon talk shows like Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, Oprah Winfrey. They were along that stripe too. They would just have a guest, and they would interview and then have the audience ask questions. So in that context, at that time, I was in high school. I think, somewhere around, it would have been 92. Let me see. It would not have been 91, I don't think. I think it was 92. And Larry King, if those of you who have seen Larry King live, he's dead, I think, but that was the same format on CNN. He would just interview the guests. That was very much like a radio show. He had a radio show. He was doing the Larry King show alongside his stint on CNN doing a video version, Larry King Live. Okay, so I'm in school. I'm like in 11th grade, something like that, and I was fascinated by talk radio. I was interested. It got me going, and somewhere in this is what I really want to talk about in this video. The 92 election campaign, you had three people. You had Bill Clinton, who was governor of Arkansas. You had the incumbent, George Bush Sr. Those of you who know, yes, his father was president too, just like John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Who? No, George Bush Sr. And Ross Perot, H. Ross Perot. I think it's Henry Ross Perot technically, but you had three of them, and H. Ross Perot was rich enough to be able to run the campaign, finance the campaign himself. So that's how he got it. Periodically in election campaigns, presidential campaigns, you'll get a third candidate in there. Usually they're considered a joke, or just considered an alternative to the two main ones. Like, for example, Ted Kennedy I think it was the 1980 presidential campaign. He was like a third one in there. So the last of the Kennedys. So anyway, okay, so back to this. So I followed the 92 campaign. Just something, I don't know what it was, but maybe I'm just attuned to following politics. I think it was because I wanted to make a difference in the world. I think I was just attracted to people who wanted to change the course of history for the better. They wanted to make the country be better than it was, improve the country. And I was also interested in Star Trek. I still am. And I think that probably fuels it too. So I'm following the campaign. And then afterward, and I'm learning various things. It's like, let me see if I can describe this. It's like I'm a young, like acolyte. I'm a young person aspiring someday to be in that position of being a presidential candidate, and this fantasy getting into my head, like I can just jump, like money doesn't mean anything. Like I can just magically be dropped in to the amongst those other candidates and just run for president. And that was my thinking at the time. Like I'm like 17, 16 years old. I mean, I guess you don't think you're not mature in your thinking. I guess at that point, I could have been worse. I could have been very immature for my age. Blah blah blah. That's another thing. That's a whole other topic. So I imagined myself, like I fantasized myself in that position, and as I fantasized while watching whatever was going on, like the presidential debates, the 3 televised debates, or following what Bill Clinton was reported to be doing in the news, in the campaign trail, or learning what I can't remember the caucuses, learning what a caucus was, and learning in the campaign, the presidential campaign cycle. There's the primaries. Yeah, learning what the primaries were like. And come to think of it, I went to Israel with an Israeli blah blah blah. I went to temple, and our class at a certain age, you was it NIFTY, the national, the New York Federation of Temple Youth would step in, and of course there's SNFTY, which is a smaller version. Yes, I'm in New York. Would step in and help finance anyone who wanted to go to Israel. So, as a class, those of us who wanted to go on the trip, this was the 1992 summer. It would have been July trip. Could go, and of course I went, and I was really happy. That could be a separate topic, but I just want to mention that it was July. It was 1992, and in some sense, for the first time, there were other kids, some of whom I knew from religious school. Those few years I had up until that point in religious Sunday school and then Monday evening school. I was familiar with those people, but there are a lot of people from New York, at least a couple people from Connecticut, and sorry, hair is getting in my mouth. And I went there, and they treated me with respect. And I felt like in school, I would feel like an outsider. I wish that they would know, like through school, the other kids would have known what I was really like, how dynamic I was. And that plays into this too, how dynamic I am, like interested in politics. And I grew up fascinated by the paranormal, particularly UFOs and Bigfoot and all these great mysteries, and expanding my horizons and expanding my imagination. I was a Star Trek fan, and they knew that, but I don't know how much they really respected Star Trek. So it was I don't want to say the first time, but I went into the trip expecting the other kids would just be to themselves in their own little cliques, and they would just ignore me, just like in school. But they really opened up, and it was on that plane trip. Again, I don't want to make a whole video out of this, but on that plane trip, I didn't know any of them, and I overheard somebody joke about a gremlin being on the wing, And I linked that with a Twilight Zone episode, specific Twilight Zone episode. I think it's Nightmare at 20,000 Feet with William Shatner. Um, and then John Lithgow in the movie version of the Twilight Zone. And I thought, anybody watching the Twilight Zone, it's right up my alley. I enjoyed that, and it's right alongside Star Trek. They probably enjoy Star Trek as well, and some of them did. In that plane trip over to Israel, I thought, okay, maybe they won't be so ostracizing towards me. Maybe they won't be so cliquish and leave me out. And I grew to embrace them as friends, and they were familiar, and they actually treated me. Anyway, okay, so you get the idea. Treated me like one of them. So you get the idea. So this is July 1992, and I remember the primaries would have been still going on. They hadn't decided who the Democratic presidential candidate would have been. They didn't decide who the Republican candidate, although it was pretty obvious it was probably going to be the president, because President Bush was already in office at that point, who's going to drop him and go for somebody else during the primaries. But I remember there was an announcement while we were there. One of the tour guides or somebody announced, or one of the managers, the adult supervising us, announced that Bill Clinton was leading in the primaries or had won the primaries. And it was nice, some supporters. And I don't think I really followed the news much, or presidential politics. I don't think I had an interest in running for president at that point. But that may have been one of the earliest inklings towards it. And then it was really when Bill Clinton was the Democratic candidate that I started to follow the news and started having this fantasy of like, what would I do in my campaign? It just led to me like wanting to follow in those footsteps. And so I was learning what the caucuses were like, what the primaries were like, what the primary cycle was like. And so then came the Democratic debates for that year, and it was especially interesting because there was a third party candidate in there. And then afterward, I followed Bill Clinton's first year and second year, especially his first year, because that's when new things came in to a presidential administration. So that was a great time to learn how a new president sets things up and sets things into motion. And at that time, I went to this World Book Encyclopedia set that I had gotten way back in elementary school. I don't remember whether it was a gift or what. I think it was one of those encyclopedia sets that they had in school, and I don't remember the circumstances. I think maybe they just let me have it at the end of the year or something like that. But anyway, it was the 1985 World Book Encyclopedia set. Anyway, I went through the 20th century presidents up until that point. I remember something that comes to mind way back in 1984, something around 1984, because I remember I was in a certain place, living in a certain place, and I remember my dad visiting. I don't remember him visiting when we were at that place, but somehow I remember him being there. I remember there was a book, we were going through the different presidents, and I think Reagan was president because they had his picture, and then I said, and then Jeffrey, my name next. And I remember my dad saying something, and then you next, Jeff next, or something like that. Maybe that's just my imagination interfering, flavoring the memory. That's how I remember it. So maybe that was a very early inkling. And then, so now back to Bill Clinton's first year. I was learning a lot, and I wrote an inaugural speech for myself, and I put together like a spiral, not a spiral binder. You open up the clips, and you can put new papers in, and I would make all sorts of notes of what I wanted to do. Like, for example, I would have a sheet saying these are the bills that I want to push through Congress. This is another sheet like this is my inaugural speech, and so forth. And I would keep those in here. These are the fundamental things that I would use to shape my economic proposal to Congress, and these are the things I want to emphasize to be able to boost the economy and so forth. I was really serious about it at the time. Okay, so going to the World Book Encyclopedia set, I started basically with Roosevelt onward, but I knew some things about Hoover, but I was just, I don't want to say enamored, that's the first thing that came to mind, but I was, it seemed like the 20th century really began with Roosevelt, and then I just learned I read the article for every president, and then I would look at those pictures, and that's what truly let me kind of bond with them and become more familiar with what they look like. And then sometimes later, I remember Truman, I hadn't really seen videos of Truman before, but sometime, and this is before the internet really was mainstream. So it could have been maybe videos on TV. That's all I would have had. But I just would see these pictures of Truman. I would see these pictures of Carter. I was familiar with Reagan enough because I grew up during, I was really the beginning of his second term, I was already like 9 or 10 when he began his second term. So, I grew up, my childhood president was really Reagan. Not that I endorsed him, it's just that that was my experience. In fact, my mom, was born in 1933, and that was the same year that Roosevelt was elected or came into office, and he served like 12 years, close to 12 years. Imagine going through up until your 12th birthday, and only at that point do they have a new president succeeding him. So anyway, I became familiar with these different presidents to the extent that it helped me learn history or keep track of history. Like it because they made such an impact. It was like a timeline. It was like a list of kings. It was like these presidents in this order, and it really shaped my understanding of history. And so my favorites, Kennedy really spoke to me, and that was 92. Yeah, 92 would have been 93. Yes, 93 would have been the 30th anniversary of his assassination, and they had something about. They had a really good drama. I have a DVD of it somewhere. It's called Kennedy, and I believe it's a 2-night. It was a 2-night thing. I can't remember who played something Brown, not Laura Brown, but the actress who played his wife, Jackie Kennedy, was something Brown, and I'm blanking on it's a famous actor who played Kennedy, and it was a miniseries, and it covered a whole swath of history right up until the assassination and a little bit afterward, and it was well done. I recommend it. And so they were re-airing that on like Lifetime or something, and I watched that, and there was this whole thing about, like, because it was the 30th anniversary of the presidential assassination, I learned a lot about Kennedy, and I was over at a friend's house. I've mentioned him before, maybe on this channel or on my other channel, Samantha Bahar. He's an older guy. In '92, so that was recent as well. In '92, I knew that there was an author of some UFO books, and he does UFO research, and it was at Cornell, and it was over 2 nights. It was Friday night, or Friday evening, and Saturday evening, and I wanted to go, and I recorded. I think I recorded at least one of them, audio recorded. Hopefully, I still have it. But I needed a ride over there, and I was already talking with somebody who established a UFO library of serious. It's not just lay books of anything about UFOs. It was at his alma mater at OCC, and I hope I'm not giving away too much geographic information. But anyway, um, he um, he's very serious and dedicated about serious UFO research, and credibility as a big thing with him. Credibility in terms of this, and just keeping up with sort of like just that was his fascination, his passion, I guess, keeping up with um, UFO developments. Yes, there are. So he recommended this person he knew who's in Mensa because he had given a presentation on UFOs to a group of Mensa people at a ground round, and that's how I discovered him. My mom, who's a member of Mensa, who wasn't really practicing or didn't go to the meetings, but she would still be getting newsletter, and she read about this blurb about his present. And that'd be fascinating to actually ask somebody, ask a Mensa member, can you pick out, it wouldn't be difficult because I can pinpoint just about exactly when the newsletter would have come out. It would have been the winter of '92. I remember there was a big storm, a big blizzard of '92, and he had given this presentation to a group of Mensa members at a ground round. And then when my mom read that, and of course, me being interested in UFOs and my mom being the encouraging type she was, she always was, she recommended, hey, here's somebody you can contact. That's all it was. And I called him and we talked on the phone. I didn't know what he looked like. It's funny, actually, sometimes when you talk to somebody over the phone, you've never seen them before. Um, so it's something funny coming up I'll get to in a bit. I talked with him on the phone and he wondered, like, the first question he asked really was, what books did I have about UFOs? And I mentioned some things in, like, I would mention each book and then he would say, oh, he's not credible, or this person's a good source, or good writing, that's not a credible source, and so forth. So that just shows you his mindset, how he dealt with the topic. So then around April of '93, the snow had, I don't know if the snow had really, by that point the snow must have started, yeah, the snow would have been melting by that point. Um, I needed some ride to this Cornell lecture, and by the way, it was David Jacobs who would be giving the presentation. So he recommended this person, and of course we drove, and I don't remember how long a trip it was, but it was certainly long enough to be able to get to know each other. And I found that I had some common traits, like how I thought and certain instincts, not too deeply, mind you, but I could get some sense that we were somewhat alike and we were compatible. So we drove there, and then we drove there a second time. So it was like twice, like 2 trips back to back. We got to know each other, and then I remember the third time. That was the time when there was a Carl Sagan article on Parade magazine. It was the newspaper, our newspaper, Parade magazine. So I remember I had that, and it was talked about when I met him at a local restaurant, just to chat. And I remember him coming over on his motorcycle, and I expected to go. It's weird. I kind of like expected to go to his house or something, but I guess he had other plans or something. Um, but over time, okay, so over the years, um, I did go to his house and we did have fun. Usually I would bring over movies, and I think this was or maybe I think he had a tape called the Missiles of October, or 13 Days in October, or something like that. It was about the Cuban Missile Crisis. And don't tell my history teacher, but I didn't know anything about this. And he was talking to me about how they were they were more diplomatic and they were more respective of the country's interests, and they weren't so selfish and self-centered. The government officials and people in the administration um, at the presidential level, and of course, I was playing smart, oh yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, what is this Cuban Missile Crisis thing? I don't know anything about it. So we watched it, and sometime later, I learned about it, and I think it was one of the great moments in Kennedy's presidency. Um, Fortunately, he recorded a lot of those meetings, and there's a lot of information. I wish I knew a lot about the Russian end. I wanted to do a movie. One reason I studied so much was about it was as I was reading and learning more about it, I thought this would make a great film because at that I may be getting my timeline off. I don't want to go there. This would make a great film. It's like the American version and the Soviet version, and the two are in a dead heat. It's like this is right in the middle of the Cold War, and you have Khrushchev and you have Kennedy. Neither one of them um, wants to drop the bomb. Like neither one of them wants to cause World War III. And it's optimistic. It ends in a great optimistic tone. After that, red phones are installed so that they didn't have to go through diplomats and questionable means, awkward means. They can simply talk to each other over the red phone. And I think it was a very positive thing in contrast to the Bay of Pigs disaster. It's a whole other topic. So yeah, continuing on with politics. This guy and I, he's much older. I'm in my late 40s. I'm 48 and I'll be 49 this November. And I think he just is in his early 70s. So there's like a generational gap basically. He's like my father's age. Would have been like, well, my actual father is much older. He was born in 1927, but like generationally, he's a member of that earlier generation than me. So back to my interest in politics. There was a movie that came out called Dave. Now, I don't remember. I didn't see Dave when it actually came out, but so this would have been. I saw it on TV, so this would have been like '94 maybe. Certainly by '95, I think I'd already seen the movie. So it's a comedy by Ivan Reitman. I think it's well done, and that's what inspired me to think of doing this video touching on this topic. I was already enthralled. I was fantasizing. I was like trying to figure out what I would do as president, figure out different policies I would enact. And here's a movie, Dave, which is lighthearted. It's fun. It's very well written, and there's drama in there, but it's along the comedic side, and it's about somebody named Dave who's a president, an impersonator, a lookalike of Bill Mitchell, and so he performs as Bill Mitchell in various places, and so he's then suddenly hired to substitute for the president, and I won't go any further, but it's a nobody, like an anybody, like Jimmy Stewart. It's in some sense I could imagine Jimmy Stewart in a role like this. It's like an everyman or Tom Hanks type person or something. It's like an everyman who just is put into this position of being president, and so that just got me right at the right time, and shows intimate moments with the first lady. I don't mean like sexy intimate. I mean, but like close moments, like the two of them interacting personally, and I just it came at the right time. So I continued developing my agenda and learning about these different things. What else? And at the same time, I was also listening to talk radio, and it was more progressive. I should mention Jim Bohannon. I should mention these radio hosts that I would listen to. About how did I discover? It was '93, I think, that I discovered Jim Bohannon and Larry King, and that's when I began I was already Bill Clinton was already president, so that's when I began listening to talk radio. I don't remember how or why, but Larry King had an afternoon show in addition to the CNN show he had at night, which I knew about that already. Um, but he had in addition to Larry King, and it was all the same station. You had Larry King, you had Jim Bohannon in the evenings, and just permit me to gush a little bit. Let me see if I can figure out the schedule. It was like during the day, you had regular news, and then I would come home from school at like 2:50, well, like 2:30 or something, and I remember, let me see, 4 o'clock would be 1 hour. No, no, 4 to 7 o'clock would be 3 hours of Dr. Dean Adele. He would give medical advice, and 7 o'clock until 10 o'clock was I can't remember. It may have been Gil Gross. I think it may have been, yeah, it would have been Gil Gross, and he was a fun broadcaster. He knew when to be lighthearted. He would throw in some barbs. Well, not necessarily. He would throw in some barbs, and he seemed very skilled, very professional, very talented, and entertaining. And he would have on guests. He would each hour. That was another typical thing that hosts would do. Typically, in a radio show like that, especially with politics, you'd have a 3 hour show, and you'd have 1 hour where there would be no guests. You would take listeners' phone calls, and usually they would say, "Oh, I love your show," da 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 da, or sometimes they would ask a question. It would usually this hour would be called something like open phones. Again, it depends on the host, but usually it's like open phones. And then assuming you have a 3 hour show, that reserves the other 2 hours for interviewing guests, and each hour would be a different guest. For the first half of that hour, the host would ask questions directly to the guest, and basically start off by saying, "So you have this new book or whatever? Tell me about it." And just ask. And then about halfway through, from this in the second half of the hour, the host would take calls from the audience, and it was pretty pretty respectful. I see that, and I contrast that with the way things are now. It's just all hate. It's name calling. It's not beyond name calling. It's like they're not even paying attention to actually suggesting solutions to problems that we have. And that's one of the things that fascinated me and interested me, made me so passionate about politics at the time. It was a Star Trek fan. I was a Star Trek fan who wanted to improve the country and loved the limelight and wanted to be very dynamic. Like, there's a little Napoleon complex. I don't know. Technically, that's a different meaning, but there's a complex within me that makes me want to be in the limelight and be bigger than life. And I haven't. I think I have that personality. It's just that I wish that even people in high school could have been able to see that in me. So there's my little moment in Visionary Ventures. There's that little moment of introspection about myself. Other than this, of course. You can comment however you want. Please be kind. So where was I? So the half hour, the limelight and so forth. And so here I am, somebody like that, growing and developing. And it was fun too. Like, I remember I was close to the year of graduation. So I graduated in 94, and then I began college early in summer school in August of 94. And in those years, no. Actually, strike that. 1993, I was still in high school. See, 1993 was, I guess, a really miraculous year for me. Tom Snyder. I discovered Tom Snyder's new show, Tom Snyder, on this new channel, CNBC. Now, their format was news, financial news during the day and talk at night, something like that. That was practically their slogan. And oh, that was so beautiful, especially for a radio listener like myself. Um, I had known Tom Snyder before. I discovered Tom Snyder when going to not that many years before, so it's something like 1991. I had gone to one of my first Star Trek conventions, and there was a video cassette that had a whole bunch of Star Trek related stuff, like bloopers and other TV shows doing their tribute to Star Trek. And then part of it was is a video cassette, a VHS video cassette. Um, Part of it was, I think, a full length or just the Star Trek part of um, an episode of The Tomorrow Show from 1976, hosted by Tom Snyder with the cast of Star Trek. And they were talking about this upcoming movie. They were generally talking about the interest of Star Trek, the phenomenon of Star Trek. But that was at the time when they were developing this Star Trek motion picture, and it had not come out yet. Can you imagine? For those of Star Trek fans out there, can you imagine the time before Star Trek the motion picture? I guess the older people can. Um, so there was that. I knew him from that, and he looked much younger. Now, when in 1993 onward, he had this show. He looks much older. Almost, you can see his earlier version in there, but he had such a wonderful, warm personality. He could quickly quip and joke and laugh. And again, I miss things. I miss hosts like that on television and on radio. I haven't listened to radio at all. So, as a matter of fact, last night I figured that I hadn't listened to Coast AM in a long time, and I decided, because I had so many of them recorded, and they were left behind because there was a whole large tote of them recorded on of the cassettes recorded. I just left it behind because I figured I could go to YouTube and recall them from there. Um, so I figured, I've watched YouTube, other things on YouTube for so long. That's been my missing thing, and I've been, over the years, I've since the move. I was in the end. That was December of 2018. I have been um, trying to regain that sense of my basic and routine, things that gave joy to me um, since then. And this was one of those things that kind of lay dormant for too long a time. So last night I just went to and I didn't even listen for that long, but I just listened for a while just to get a sense of Art Bell's voice again. He would talk about, it's an interesting thing about him, like these other people, he started off just doing politics, and he, as a child, he was fascinated, and outside his personal life, he was fascinated by the paranormal, and so he started having a show on the weekends, Dreamland, and that in that show he would interview guests who were influential in paranormal circles, and so during the weekdays he would talk about politics, and during the weekends he had, at least for one day of the weekend, he would have this show where he could talk about paranormal, and then the paranormal crept into his regular show. Now, here's how I discovered it. Now, I mentioned Gil Gross, the Gil Gross show before, it was 7 to 10, and then Jim Bohannon from 10 to 1 in the morning, and by that point, it would be usually a school night, and I would have been asleep anyway. It would have been only a few hours until I would have to wake up to go to school anyway. So, all right, so that's about when I would drift off to bed. So I would, let me see, I would listen to these callers call in to Jim Bohannon during open phones. I think his open phones was before the two. No, would have he had two guests first, and then his third hour was open phones. Because I remember at one point it was very funny. There was one guest. I have this recorded because they would repeat it at some point when this aired. It was the time when our local station would repeat it um, afterwards, immediately afterwards. So if you wanted to record what you're listening to, you could get the tape ready in time so that like at 1 o'clock when the show would be over, they would be repeating the second hour and third hour, something like that. So fortunately, I hope I still have this. He was interviewing Thomas More, who had come out with Care of the Soul, and I think Jim Bohannon is now dead, so I guess I won't get any backlash from him on this. But and it's open, it's public. He said it publicly on the air, so I think I'm okay. Um, Callers were calling in and saying, many of them were saying how boring the interview was. And then I remember this moment where it's so funny. This is a taste of like some of the great things comedy you'd hear on the radio, and I felt like such a nerd. Like I enjoyed it, but in context with other kids in class, I felt like I enjoyed something that was really, really special and beautiful, and they wouldn't understand it. They were off on their own. Um, okay, Jim Bohannon's show. This one episode, um, he said at one point that was the most that was the most something that was the most painful exercise in thumb sucking that I've ever been compelled to sit through. I remember that word for word. I don't know about the awkward thing, but I remember that exercises in thumb sucking that I've ever been compelled to sit through. And he was the one doing the interview. I remember that, and I remember him. Oh, this is dated. This is kind of dated. He mentions the Leonid meteor shower that was going over, and he said that for those of you who are looking out, tonight's going to be the Leonid meteor shower. So then he says, so there are actual things. Oh, yes. There were also callers. Not only did he have that, but there were callers calling in about sort of paranormal stuff or conspiracy, something about conspiracy related stuff. And he said the Leonid meteor shower. So there are actually things going on out there in the real world, but I don't think anybody really cares. And then he goes on to the next caller. It's really fun radio. So from that, I remember callers calling in about this host called Art Bell and talking about conspiracy theories and aliens and moon bases underground and all this other stuff. And I hadn't known about this Art Bell before, but it intrigued me. And I wish I had known, how do I listen to this guy, right? So, and Jim Bohannon, I don't want to say looked upon him with contempt or whatever, but just say Jim Bohannon would make remarks like responses to these callers as, yeah, you really believe that stuff or something, or tell me, because he was much more of a skeptic. Well, how do you believe? Well, how do you know this and so forth? So that was his take on it. That's how he would respond. And then I've talked about this before, I guess. My mom, she would hear voices that she would attribute to the neighbors, and I wanted to write. I've written a book about it. I've written a memoir. A little plug for myself, right? I've written a memoir about cross-dressing, and it also includes, a memoir of different things, different topics. And one topic is about cross-dressing. Another topic is about my mom and what I think was hearing voices and so forth. I guess it may have been schizo. It's only my non-expertise take on it, which would be schizoaffective disorder, possibly. Seems to point in that direction, but anyway, she would have the radio going at night to distract her from these voices, and that's how this new show, Coast to Coast AM, just came up, and she talked to me the next morning, or soon afterwards, about Coast to Coast AM, and she was fascinated, and she was as interested in um, these kinds of things. She was open-minded, not only open-minded about the paranormal, but she had a PhD. She great schooling, Yale University, and so forth, and Cornell undergraduate. So she definitely had schooling, PhD, and so forth. PhD in psychology. Um, but she was open-minded. She was brilliant. She was. I don't say that just because she was my mom, but she was open-minded, and she wanted to entertain new ideas. She wanted to discuss things. Like a lot of our deep discussions were on topics like this, uh, or Star Trek, or science fiction, or just world news, or baseball. She loved baseball. She liked Brooklyn Dodgers, where she grew up in Brooklyn Dodgers, and she liked she didn't like playing basketball. She felt awkward playing basketball because she put it, there were other women like pushing up against, like being physical, and somehow like woman on woman, it felt awkward for her. But she would watch SU games all the time whenever they were on, and she would just be in the other room just watching, and she actually cheering. It wasn't just something on TV. She was actually cheering, and she would watch Jeopardy as so forth. She was really good at Jeopardy, and these other shows. She really engaged, and she really, if she were talking with you about a topic, she never played lip service. She would talk directly to you, and she would talk genuinely, and as one of two people, you being the other person, one of two people engaged in this topic, and sharing what you knew, and her sharing what she knew. I hope I'm conveying that well. But anyway, that was our relationship, and she was talking about Coast to Coast AM, and so somewhat after then, I got this quarter speed tape deck, which recorded at 1/4 the speed, so you can get almost the entire. Now, Art Bell had a 5-hour show, and if you skip the first hour, or no, if you, well, it would, I think it skipped out towards the end. So you lost like the final hour. That's right, you lost the final hour, but it would record 4 hours recorded at slow speed, and then you would play it back at that same slow speed. So it would quadruple the length of time you could get on a single cassette. And all those cassettes I left behind. Not all cassettes. I mean, I took like a garbage bag full of cassettes in general, but I left behind a whole carefully organized and so forth, tray after tray after tray, all within this large plastic tote. But anyway, it was just huge to lug, and I was thinking of space, living space, and so forth. So anyway, where was I going with that? So I guess I'm deviating off topic. This is supposed to be about politics. So, what soured me? Really, it's the fact that politics is now not about resolutions to problems. CNBC. I've got to talk about CNBC. I went off track. 1993. So there was Tom Snyder, and then they had other talk show hosts with talk show background. They had, surprisingly, they had, I can't remember his name, black-skinned, famous, nationally well-known. I think it was on either CBS or NBC. He was the weatherman. I'm blanking on his name. Everybody, you would probably recognize his name if you're. He had a show. Al Roker, that's the name. Al Roker had a show. Equal Time with Mary Matlin, and then there was a period of several co-hosts that she had. She started whatever. There was Equal Time. It was a friendly, warm, familiar environment. Dick Cavett, I remember, who had a show earlier in the 1970s, and Tom Snyder had his show in the 1970s. So some of them from the 1970s, they had a show. Now there was Real Personal with Bob Berkowitz, which is on after Tom Snyder. And oh, I loved his. I should do another one just on talk shows. Another video like this just on talk shows. Um, Bob Berkowitz was on right after Tom Snyder, and I remember sometimes they would do a pitch off like Tom Snyder may say, "Oh, and Bob Berkowitz comes on after my show. What's he talking about?" He would just there was always like he would be right in front of the camera, and then there would be like in a studio. Picture him sitting in a chair, comfortable chair, and then there's just a camera, and he just would look off to the side. Hey, what's Bob Berkowitz talking about after my show? Oh, plastic dummies or something. Oh, that'll be really interesting. Ha 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 ha. It just like a lighthearted camaraderie. Actually, Real Personal. Bob Berkowitz dealt with issues of like sexual at a mature level, though. It's something like a male. Well, I don't want to compare him to Dr. Ruth Westheimer, but it was an adult level like relationships and sex played into it sometimes, like different topics, adult topics, mature, respectable level. And Tom Snyder, Dick Cavett, and wonderful. And then at the end, I think it was usually at the end of the year or sometime in the middle of the year, they would year-end review. Oh yeah. They would have a whole bunch of them on stage, and then there would be an audience, and the audience members would ask them questions. I remember I recorded at least one of these on video cassette. I saved all my video cassettes, still have them in boxes, and CNBC, and it was fascinating to watch all of them. Oh, Daisy Fuentes, who was I think she was a supermodel. She had her show, and there was another E. Jean Carroll. I think even had a show. No, I think she was on some other. I think she was on CNET, but I remember. Yes, I'd heard of before the current scandal thing with E. Jean Carroll. I actually did hear of her. I knew of her way back. I wish we could go back to that time. Fortunately, I do have those video cassettes, and I have those memories. Like my mom pointed, when I was talking about Wizard of Oz, don't you want to watch? So I'd gotten a Blu-ray full, like ultimate edition of Wizard of Oz that had like all the different documentaries and variations and so forth. And that was her favorite film, favorite childhood film, and close to the end of her life, like within that same year maybe, I asked her, don't you want to watch this? And she said, no, it's all up here. So anyways, like it's all up here. Like fortunately I grew up at that time. I experienced it in real time. That I can't say this too many times. I wish that there was a time when politics, sure there was fighting between Democrats and Republicans. Like from my point of view anyway, it seemed like the talk radio, the conservative Republican hosts of talk radio would, like G. Gordon Liddy and Rush Limbaugh and so forth. Sure, they were poking at Democrats and making fun of Democrats and some really underhanded ways of talking, like even making fun of Bill Clinton's daughter Chelsea, calling her. I remember Rush Limbaugh saying, they have a cat. Did you know they also have a dog? And then he showed on his TV show, he showed a picture of Chelsea Clinton. I mean, that's unfair. The really sad part about that is that was tame. I mean, that's extreme at the time, but that's mild in contrast with how the normal discourse, like how they talk now. I don't even want to get into it. So I guess I've been talking for a long while. I don't know what else to include, but I've thought about maybe another video talking about my interest in the paranormal. I'm sure I'll think of other things. I didn't even get to this, but I'm so excited to devote a whole episode to explaining how these numbers might have been derived, and importantly, And again, these are the numbers in chapter 5 of Genesis, and then chapter 11, and what they all mean, 26 generations. Because I believe that it wasn't dictated by God, but that doesn't mean that there was some kind of important group of writers who got together, probably using out, maybe they were Babylonians, who had an agenda, who wrote from a certain point of view, and with that perspective, crafted this story. And that's another passion of mine that's replaced politics, I guess. I want to talk about the evolution of this, why you have like two versions of the Septuagint. I think it's the Codex. Oh, anyway, Codex A and Codex B, if I remember correctly. Alexandrian, I think, in Codex. Oh, anyway, you have the Masoretic and you have the Samaritan version and so forth. I really want to get into that. Plus, I've already talked about how from the website CHAVER, either .com or .org, I think it's .com, it seems the 5 books seem designed to be pictorially seen as a book up here, a book down here, a book here, a book here, and then Leviticus right in the middle. So it goes Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then across it's Genesis, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy, going from individuals into a country, and then these 2 books having some kind of interaction with the divine, direct interaction with the divine, and then Leviticus right in the middle. It seems to be very well designed. I want to understand why it was constructed the way it was, and what those numbers mean, and so forth. I'm really excited. I hope you are as excited as I am. I hope you see the interest. I hope you see the significance that I see in it. So, all right, enough talking. I'm going to get something to drink. I'm going to have fun splattering food all over my face as I gobble down and enjoy TV. So I'll see you next time.